Hey everyone, it's Lexie. In today's video I'll be sharing with you my winter reading recommendations. So winter is probably one of my favorite time to read books, and I think it's just because it's cold outside, it's dark, and then you're nice and cozy at home. And I always enjoy the weekends, like when you just get up and it's still a little dark outside and I have my nice cup of tea, and we always usually have a fire going, and then especially around Christmas time with the Christmas tree and the lights. So I think it really creates a good reading atmosphere. So I have 5 winter reading recommendations here for you. Some of them do take place during winter, so I felt they were seasonal appropriate. So they're very kind of have that cold winter atmosphere. And then some are just good historical fiction novels that I think are just kind of the perfect time to read during this season. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So starting out, I first had The Girl in the Ice by Robert Bryzenda, and this is the first book in the Erica Foster series. So I read this book last year and I loved it, and I have a couple of these on my wish list. Hopefully I will be able to get some of them up at the end of the year around Christmas and my birthday. But this one is basically, it follows a woman who is a detective in London, and this daughter from a very affluent family in England is found in the ice, and that leads her on to an investigation because it's suspected as a suicide, but she sees something, she thinks there was some foul play involved, so she is investigating that. But this takes place basically in the bitter winter in London. So I can just I was like, when I was reading this, I felt cold reading it, and it's very atmospheric, and I can totally picture London during this time. So I think it's the perfect book to read when you're getting all cozy inside, like inside by the fire. So this is a really good start to this crime series, so I'm really excited to continue on with this in the new year. But yeah, Erica is such a strong female protagonist, and she does have some unique quirks and a dark past that we learn about. So she's a very dynamic and complex character too, which is always a plus. So this is another book that takes place during kind of a winter storm, and it is Mean Streak by Sandra Brown, and I read this book, I want to say earlier this year, I want to say. So it follows a doctor who is training for a marathon in the Smoky Mountains, and she ends up getting whacked on the side of the head, and she wakes up in some stranger's cabin, and they end up getting snowed in this very isolated cabin in the mountains. And so she's trying to figure out how she got the bump in her head, and then she's also kind of stuck in this cabin with this mysterious man who's hiding. So this one was really interesting. Again, it takes place during like a blizzard, like a snow out blizzard. So that one was totally atmospheric, and this book is very suspenseful. I found with Sandra Brown's book, she is very good at creating, like, every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, so you want to keep reading. So therefore it's a quick read, and I really like this one. It was very suspenseful, and it honestly kept me guessing until the last page. Like, this book was really good, and just because it takes place during winter, I think it'll be a perfect winter read. This was a historical fiction book that I read this summer, and I really want to reread it again this following winter, just because I loved it so much. And it was The Alice Network by Kate Quinn. And so this book follows 2 women over the course of 2 different wars. So we have Charlie, who is pregnant, and she is on a mission to find her cousin Rose, who disappeared during World War II. So she ends up crossing paths with this woman who is very, I don't know, she's very, there's something about her, and so they end up getting like kind of tangled together into this story. And so while this is going on, we kind of get Eve, who is the older woman, like the role she played during World War I, and she was a spy. And somehow, even though these stories are very much separated by 20 years or so, they're somehow so intertwined, and this book was just amazing. Like, it gave me the Nightingale feels, and that book is probably one of my favorite historical fictions of all time, and this one is really up there as well. And yeah, I just love the friendship in here, and this is definitely a book that I think a lot of you will love. And I feel like winter is the best time to read historical fiction, so I could not recommend this book enough. It was just amazing. This is another historical fiction book that I read recently, and it is The Clockmaker's Daughter by Kate Morton. This is Kate Morton's newest release. I've read all of her books, and so this is the one that came out this year. And so it follows a woman during present day who is an archivist, and she finds this box that's been stowed away at her company for several years, and inside that box is a satchel that has a artist's sketchbook and then a picture of a woman. So she's very curious who this satchel belongs to, and while this is going on, we're getting this book's told from many different point of views, and for the other main point of view is Birdie, who is a ghost that is haunting this house, and we don't really know her connection to what's going on, but this book was honestly amazing. I loved it. Kate Morton is probably one of my favorite authors of all time, and this one is really good. It adds some supernatural paranormal aspect to this book that her other ones haven't had, but definitely this is in my top 3. It's not my favorite, but it is still very, very good. And there are so many like subplots in here that you don't really understand like how they're related to the story, but at the end they all get connected together, and that was probably my favorite. So this book is just a lot of fun, and I could not recommend it enough. And lastly, this book is really unrelated to all of the other books, and it's a nonfiction book that I ended up reading back in February. And so like when we had like a really big snowstorm where I was living, and I did a reading vlog for it, which I'll link up in the cards there, but I ended up reading it during that time where we had like 3 feet of snow, and it was Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and this is basically talking about how humans evolved to be where they are today. So I double majored during my undergrad, and anthropology was one of them, so this was totally up my alley, and I find I'm more physical anthropology focused, and that's what I kind of focused on during my undergrad. So I enjoy kind of more like physical evolution, but this one was more cultural based, which I did find really interesting, but it relied really heavily on religion, and I'm not very religious, so some of the stuff it talks about in here I just wasn't able to get the references. But other than that, it's a very interesting read. And I also read Homo Deus, which is talking about where humans are evolving to. Like, this wasn't like it didn't live up to my expectations, but I think this, like during the winter when you can't really go outside or anything, I think this is a good time to read this because it is quite an intense read, but nonetheless it was still very interesting, and I was just a little picky about some of the stuff in here, but it's a very well researched book and it is very interesting. That's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what winter reading recommendations you have and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye guys.